deal with that in Asterisk. And when do we want to do this? Well, usually in voicemail is when this comes to mind. And so in voicemail.conf, and remember that golden rule if you're new to Asterisk, you just think of the thing you want to change, then you add .conf on the end of it, and you go and look for it in etc asterisk. That's the kind of rule, isn't it? I'd like to change my voicemail. Well, go and look in voicemail.conf. I was thinking of changing my SIP configuration. We'll go and look in SIP.conf. You know, it's a pretty straightforward rule that we can follow there. So in etc asterisk voicemail.conf, there's a section called zone messages. It's easily spotted by the fact it's under the general section and before the voicemail context. It kind of just sits there hovering. And for those of you interested in detail, it's easily identified by looking for the word zone messages in the file as well. Once you get in there, you'll find that you can set zones. Now, these zones are not time zones, although they contain time zones. They're general zones for your voicemail users. And in fact, let me just have a little... There you go, I've got one. So, in the zone messages section, I've set up 2 zones. Notice that the names of those zones are totally arbitrary. They're not connected with any standard that you know about in Linux. I could have called one David and the other one Mark if I'd wanted to. But they do then make reference to Linux time. Okay, and the departure from GMT. Because remember, we British own time, you know, the Greenwich Meridian. So they make reference to the difference that you are from that. So in addition to that, we've also got some other things and these are the places where we're altering kind of the order of things and the way things are pronounced. And then you'll be used to seeing this. We're in the default voicemail context here. There's a mailbox called 809. The PIN is a very secure one. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there you go. I'm saying the time zone is UK. So that immediately puts that voicemail box in that particular time zone. So this means for multi-tenant systems, you can have your guy ringing in from France to the same asterisk as you're ringing in from the US, and you both hear your voicemails in real time in terms of the time and date stamps. That's wonderful, isn't it? It's a beautiful thing. And do you know what makes it even more beautiful? It's free. Just go and download it from the internet. Okay, let's move on. So, what about changing the language or even accent of the language? Okay, well, of course, ever since we had Asterisk 1.4, we've had varlib asterisk sounds / and then we've got a 2-letter, wait, in fact, I'm not even sure whether it has to be 2 letters. You might be able to get away with more letters. Does it have to be 2 letters? Okay. I beg your pardon? Right, okay, so you've got the 2 letters. And within these subdirectories, we can put different prompts. So we can put FR for France, for example, ES for España or Spain. In fact, there's some examples. So if we were using EN for English, FR for French. Now, of course, Asterisk is only going to deal with one set of file names. So we'd be thinking of hello.gsm. But hello.gsm in varlib asterisk sounds en could actually contain the spoken word hello, whereas in the French version it could contain bonjour. Right, so you can deal with these languages. Or, of course, if it was Scottish, it could be okay. Maybe said with a slightly drunken slur and some aggression. I'm only joking, Alistair. I'm only joking. Okay. Let's move on. I beg your pardon? Well, yes, in fact, that's... Okay. Great. Okay, yeah. There you go. Allocated. Allocated. Now, I'll just let you into a little secret between the English and the German. They're actually both the same, but we just remove the sense of humour for the German. So it tends to do. Okay. Right, we'll just better move on quickly. Okay. So it's all very well having these things, but how do we actually make reference to them? Well, we can set them in a number of places. The most popular place is in the channel. So in the profile for that individual SIP phone, or in the general section of SIP.com, you can set the language. You can say, whenever anything comes in via SIP, it's English. Or whenever anything comes in this specific SIP profile, it's going to be German. So you can do that. But, or in the case of the analog or digital cards, we can set it in chandadi.conf. However, we can also do it in the dial plan. And for those of you that watch the dial plan like a hawk over the various iterations of Asterisk, it has changed. There's been language, set language, and now we're talking about a channel function, but we'll come to that in a moment. So, there, for instance, we're setting the language in the general section of SIP.conf. So anything that came in SIP would be spoken in English. However, for my specific phone, I'm now setting it to FR. So if it's anything other than that phone, it's going to be English. But if it's that phone coming in, or that trunk coming in, depending on what it is, it will be French. And then, when I play out the file, it will have the desired effect. However, we can also set it in the dial plan. And the latest way to do this is using the channel function and the language argument of the channel function. So we can set that. And now you can see I've constructed a fairly kind of rudimentary menu for people to pick which language they'd like to continue in. And then we can set the language accordingly. Okay, so if you've used older versions of Asterisk, you may have been used to language or even set language for doing this stuff. Any questions so far? Or comments? Yes, sir. Sorry, can you say the question again, please, sir? Yes. It's more to do with the calls that come into Asterisk rather than the calls that go out of Asterisk. So we make the decision as the call comes into Asterisk in the way we're going to handle the language prompts and things. Once we actually send a call out of Asterisk, language is no longer an issue because we're... Okay, so there's a few different ways we could do it. We could either say, when a call comes in on this particular SIP trunk, which we know is our Spanish number, we set everything to be Spanish on that particular SIP profile, and that would be done here. And if this was really the Spanish SIP incoming line, we could set it to ES, for example. It'd be good to have a default one, just in case there. And if we had things coming in from a particular analog or digital channel, we could also do that as well. Or we could give people the menu, and it's very common, of course, in America, to be greeted with a menu that says press 1 for English, 2 for Spanish, for example. Or the Spanish equivalent of whatever that is. I'm afraid my Spanish is not particularly good. Okay, any other questions at the moment? Okay, are you enjoying yourselves? Can you tell your faces to represent that? Okay, good. All right, let's crack on then. Okay, what about caller ID, I hear you ask? Well, there are lots and lots of caller ID formats out there in the world. I knew this from an early age because from an early age, call me a geek, but I used to buy telephones in different countries and bring them back to England and plug them in. And I noticed the American ones I could never get caller ID working on until I discovered Asterisk. And Asterisk became my caller ID gateway for changing all these different things. And that's because in the UK we use a thing called V23 or frequency shift keying to represent it. And it actually arrives between the first and second rings. So if you could listen to the analog line before you actually pick the phone up, and of course with one of those Batinsky test sets you can do that, you'd hear ring, ring, and then that is converted into the caller ID information. Fortunately, Asterisk can understand multiple different kinds of caller ID signaling. And we set, well, where would we set that? Who's going to win a chocolate by telling me where we might set that? It is DARDI, but which DARDI configuration file are we talking about here? Sorry? chandardi.conf. Thanks for having got, but chandardi.conf is going to do it. And the reason is this. etc systemdardi.conf is really telling the card how to work inside Linux. It's kind of divorced from Asterisk. etc asterisk, there's the hint, etc asterisk chandardi.conf is telling Asterisk how to deal with the incoming stuff or send the outgoing stuff over that line. And so that's where all of those kind of decisions are made. And here we are. I've got a picture of a BT phone from the UK just to represent we're doing this with BT. So in chandardi.conf, here are 3 key things. CID signaling, the first one. So what type of signaling am I using? And in this case, it's V23, which is the BT standard. If you're in any doubt as to what your country uses, just go and phone your, well, don't phone your friend, dial into your friend Google on the internet and just with Asterisk Australia caller ID, and you'll kind of get the requisite settings. In fact, I'm pretty sure there's a voip-info.org page devoted to this stuff, because there's a voipinfo.org page devoted to most things, isn't there, these days. So CID signaling that we're using is V23. That's the standard. But importantly, we need to know, how does it start? How does my telephone line tell Asterisk to look out for some caller ID? Now, why is this important? Exactly, so it's actually going to find it. Because If it doesn't see the thing that it's expecting to see, it knows to move on, not just to wait there, because this can very often cause delays to incoming analog lines. Jason, you get your second chocolate of the day there. Well done, that man. Top class. That's an orange cream. That one's quite a nice one. Not a bad one. So, and then in England, it tends to get sent after the second ring, and you can even configure that in Asterisk. So I'm saying you start your caller ID by indicating the polarity. You switch the polarity over, and what that does is just takes the twisted pair and goes like that momentarily. Then we're saying it's in the V23 signalling and sending after the second ring. Now, these two here have actually set Asterisk to recognize the incoming caller ID as well. And the third one has said, and by the way, Asterisk, if you're called upon to send caller ID over the analog line, over the FXS interface to drive the phone, then send it after 2 rings. And then the only other thing we have for an incoming line, so for an FXO interface, we need to do caller ID equals as received if we want the caller ID off that PSTN channel to be propagated to the rest of Asterisk and show up on your beautiful SIP phones. I think you need a chocolate there, Steve. Let me just give you a little free chocolate there. That's quite all right. Quite all right. Okay. And when, by the way, I didn't explain this. Telespeak, my company, is the Digium authorised Asterisk training partner in the UK. We do all of the Asterisk training in the UK, the Netherlands, Belgium, and a number of other countries. But when we started in the UK, one of the things I did, especially, was buy some very, very standard BT phones that said BT all over them and had BT plugs and sockets so that we could prove to everybody that we're really driving the UK caller ID rather than fiddling around with the system. Okay, now, physical characteristics, and this is a very important one. I can give you a real-life case study here. In England, we use this plug. That is the BT standard plug. It's got a number. I just happen to have forgotten the number. But, of course, the Digium FXO and FXS card is going to have RJ11s, isn't it? And rightly so, because that's a nice standard for that kind of stuff. However, in England, if you go to the cupboard and pick out a lead that has got a BT plug on one end and an RJ11 on the other, they are not all created equal. And I happened to be breezing around Digium HQ in Huntsville once, and I think it was John Bigelow called me over and said, "Hey, you're English." I said, "Correct, yes." He said, "We've got this problem with an analog card over there. We've tried swapping the card, we've tried this, we've tried that." And after a while, I didn't immediately suss it out, but after a while I said, "Who supplied that lead?" And he said, "Well, you know, the local guy just plugged in what he got." And I said, well, not all of these are created equal. Because if anybody in the room is old enough to remember the days of the 28.8 dial-up modem, or the 56K dial-up modem, there was a lot of these leads circulating at these times that did things like move wires from one place to another or cross them over or what.